The BERNINA 570 Quilters Edition is a machine that is totally customizable. For the way you sew, the way I sew, they're all different. So if you want to override default settings or set the machine up for things that you want it to do, you're going to be going over to the Home menu. And we're going into where the picture of the gears are. So in here, there are different categories, and in each category, there are different things that we can set up. What we set up in here is going to be remembered when the machine turns off. So settings that you love are going to be set here, and then you will be keeping them until you change them to something else. So as we kind of work our way through, let's start in this first one with all the sewing features. You're going to notice right up here that it will show us each of the buttons that we've touched, and they're going to kind of come and grow as we dip into further and further levels of each area. To go back one level, you can always touch the one right from the top, so you don't go out and then have to go all the way back in. So we'll just kind of watch as we do each of these. So in these areas too, if you're unfamiliar with maybe what one of the symbols is representing, touch the question mark and you can touch it, and it will then describe, just like looking up in your manual, what it's doing, and so you can read about it. So this one was actually tension. So as you can see, I touched it again, so now that's why there's three little symbols up top, and I can easily back up one page when I'm done instead of just Xing out. So that's what I'll be doing. So let's talk about tension. You can actually change the global tension of this machine by increasing it with a plus. You can slide, or you can even touch and turn the dials, and that will also move that little slider around. Remember, anything that is yellow, if you touch it, it does go back to its normal setting and get you kind of back to where you started. So this means that if I was using some thread that I was always seeming to having to adjust the top tension, say lower by 2 numbers when I'm using it, like some of my decorative stitches and things, what I can do is actually set it so my global tension is automatically 2 numbers less for the entire machine. So it doesn't matter what stitch I pick, it automatically shifts it down to numbers. So you can go in and set it. Just remember to probably reset that back when you are done. Let's just go back out one screen. Let's talk about speed. This is like the full speed of your machine. So if you just want to drop it down, instead of 1,000 stitches per minute, you can actually set the global speed to be much less. Here is one where your needle can be used for locking, but you can also turn it off. So if you are not a fan of where the machine is doing those locking stitches, you can actually switch that from green to red, which is off, and then it won't do the stitches where it normally does those. So I'm going to leave mine on because I do like those. All right, this one's probably the one I use a lot. So it has a picture of a finger touching a button. In here, these items are buttons that you can customize. Now the one I use the most is probably this one right here, but let's go through each of them as we go. So this is a foot. How far do you want that foot to lift when it is done sewing? Some of you might want it more or less. 2 millimeters of a lift is about the normal setting, so you can change that. When you touch the scissor button, what else would you like it to do? Would you like it to lock when you touch it? So you touch it and it'll take a few extra stitches in a cluster, or spread out into short, very close together stitches up to from 2 to, I think it's 6, yes, 6 times. You can choose that, or you can turn it off. So if you don't want any extra things when you touch the scissor button for cutting, just leave it off. But there is times where I love to have that do the extra lock for me. The next one, the reverse. This is the reverse in the back stepping option, where it will always repeat the stitches. As it came forward, it will go back in the same holes as it goes backwards. Without that, that is just a normal back stitching, and this one is actually back stepping into the holes it had just recreated for every stitch it's currently sewing. You'll have to try these because everyone will find settings that will be right for them, and others that you're like, I didn't really see any benefit for it. How about this one, pattern end? That's the one right here on the front of your machine. When you touch it, do you want it to lock? Do you want it to cut? Do you want it to lift the foot? You name what you want it to do when you touch it. I am a fan of letting it do the cutting and lifting after I use it. So that will finish a decorative stitch to the last stitch, so it looks good when it's done. It's not halfway finished, and then it will cut it and lift. I love that when I'm doing my stitch book, because it makes it really easy to just get to the end of the stitch and then move on to the next row. Okay, here's the one I talked about that I use a lot. And the reason I use it a lot is because there's times where I have this on, and then the next time I want to actually turn it off. So right now I have it set that when the needle stops in the fabric, that the foot will raise. That's kind of like the pivot position. Well, there's times that when I'm stopping and starting so many times, yes, I want my needle to stop down, but I don't need the foot to pop up. So I'll often come in and turn it down to the don't lift feature. A lot of people like this, but like I said, if you're doing a lot of starts and stops, this may not be ideal for you. It does take just a hair of a second to stop and lift before it starts again. You can see this one's going to just lift a little taller. When I'm doing our curves for our Stitching Cosmos course, I love that middle feature because what it does is helps the fabric relax as I'm trying to make those curves kind of stitch, stitch, pause, and then they kind of relax so they don't get little puckers in the middle of it. So that is a wonderful feature to try out. So find the one that works for you. Again, probably the one that I probably come in here a lot. I'm turning it off and on depending, probably from project to project. Okay, so that's that whole entire area. So let's just come back out. And our last one here is our foot control. So we know that if you rock your heel on the back of your foot control, the needle will go a half a stitch. So if the needle's up, it goes down, and if it's down, it comes up without you having to touch one of the buttons or turn the hand wheel like that. But did you know you could actually set the heel of your foot control for other things, like a cut, like a foot lift, like a locking stitch. So you could actually have it do other things depending on what you would like it to be. So it's programmable. So if you don't want that any other options, just leave it for that needle up, needle down feature. But that is a great place to customize your foot control for the way you sew. Okay, so that's that entire screen. We're going to back out. Now we're going to get into the settings for the embroidery. So I think I'm actually going to do most of these in another video because as we get into embroidery, they are all relevant over there. But you can see that in each one of these, there are things for adjusting for the thickness of your embroidery, whether you want your thread cutter on or off, locking stitches, and such. So there's lots that you can do with the embroidery part. This last little, this is like your customization. You can customize your welcome screen and also the background color of your machine. So right now it's been on blue, but you could go ahead and change it to a variety of different colors and textures. So have some fun. You can name your machine, put it where that welcome area is, and that'd be fun. Okay, what's this little eye? This eye, if for any reason that you are getting a message where your thread, top thread sensor is always going off, you can actually come in here and turn it so the sensor is no longer activating and you can continue to sew. There's times where I want to sew with no thread in my needle, so I'll come in here and turn that off, and then the machine is going to just let me sew with no thread. Same thing for the bobbin. If it's sensing that the bobbin is out and it's actually not, you can come in and actually turn that off. But have your machine checked out by your local BERNINA technician so they can get that fixed for you. But I like that you can kind of deactivate the sensors without totally having to stop all sewing progress. Now, here's another thing I've actually gone in when I started doing these videos is I turned off the sound. So right now you can actually have it so it sounds differently depending on what you are touching. You can find different beeps for different things, but I didn't want it to be making noise every time I touch the screen, so I actually turned that off. So if you like a nice quiet sewing area, you'll probably want to eliminate the beeps to that. This last one is actually kind of more of a service mode where you can do a couple things in here. We've got things like, let's see here, I better not change, don't change the language, let's get that back to English, unless you're ready to know which one you're working with. We'll just leave that, but that's your language choice. The lighting, there's times where I will adjust the lighting for where I'm sewing, and also the brightness of your screen. So that can all be adjusted, especially if you're by a window or you're just getting some extra light or glare on some of your fabrics. Like vinyls can sometimes give you a glare and it's kind of too bright to look at while you're sewing, so turn off your light. All right, eye for information, this is your updating area, which again you can do or your local service person can do. In here we can do some of the, let's see here, some of the different, clearing out the different settings. So this is kind of a part where you can kind of reset the machine. And in here we can do some updating, calibrate your buttonhole, clean the cutter. So we'll do a video on that one. Your oiling area where we can actually see how to lubricate this machine. And then also some things that relate to positioning of the embroidery module. So a lot of these are not always something I need to do, but there are definitely things I do adjust from time to time, depending on my fabric, my project, where I'm sewing, and how quiet I want it to be. So I hope you'll play around with these and try out some of those customizations, especially like the foot control, the pattern end option, and those needle up, needle down with the foot in the pivot position. That is a quick overview of your settings menu for the BERNINA 570.